this is the Neptunian Kitty Kitty here with this segment called the Super Simple Birth Chart. Now, if you are new to my channel or if you're already getting into tarot and you've been watching my channel, you notice that I refer and go by astrology. And for some of you, you might have heard me say placements, sun, moon, rising Venus, Mars, or they have this in their natal chart. So I decided to do this series to explain exactly what a natal chart is in the terms of topical astrology. Now, there is a difference between topical and Vedic astrology. And the difference between topical and Vedic astrology is that topical astrology goes by a fixed certain date. Like, for example, Leo season is July 22nd until August 22nd. Whereas in Vedic astrology, that would be called Sidral Cancer season, because in Vedic astrology, they go by this concept called real sky, aka the current transits, and that's also based on how the way the Earth's axis was tilted. So, for example, I'm a Leo sun. In Vedic astrology, I'm a Cancer sun. And you just go back by one. Whereas if I'm a Scorpio moon, I'm a Libra moon. And if I'm a Pisces rising, I am an Aquarius rising. And they use terms such as Rahu and Ketu and Malefic and Benefic. And they also use deities like Ashaleshla, I believe. I'm pronouncing that wrong. And I am oversimplifying it. But for the sake of understanding the natal chart, I am going to be following topical astrology, and that's what I learned how to study my chart with back in 2006 when I was 15. Yeah, I'm up there. But I started reading this book called The Only Astrology Book You'll Ever Need, and that's how it broke the natal chart down and the houses, the planets, Time Lords, the energies, the degrees, the decans, and all of that good stuff. But before we get further into that, the purpose of this video is to explain the basis of the natal chart and the basis of the three signs that we're made up of, which is our sun sign, our moon sign, our rising, and we're going to learn together how all of that combines to create our personal universe and how it all helps us when it comes to terms of synastry, current transits, and stuff like that. But for now, we're going to get into the three signs that we're made up of, which is our sun sign, which is our CEO. So, for example, I'm a Leo sun and my moon's in Scorpio. So, your moon sign is who you are behind closed doors. It's, the person you are in your darkest of the dark. Like, it's it's your shadow, basically. And then there's also a black moon placement, but we'll get into that later. But then there's your rising sign. So there's your sun, your moon, and your rising. So your sun sign, like I said, is your CEO. Your moon sign is who you are behind closed doors. And your rising sign is the representative that goes out and does the networking for your sun and your moon sign. They say that your rising sign is there to protect your sun sign, which is the CEO. Your rising sign is the zodiac sign. You take the astrological features. Like, for example, in this chart right here, this person's first house is in Capricorn. So they might have physical features of a Capricorn. So they might have very prominent bone structures, very beautiful cheekbones, very nice skin, very into skincare. Whereas if somebody has their first house in Aquarius, they have very beautiful ankles, beautiful legs. They come off as very humanitarian. Whereas a Capricorn rising comes off as very strict, very disciplined, very organized. And a Pisces rising is somebody who might have big eyes, might be short in stature, have nice feet, very into pedicures. So that's essentially what the rising sign is. It is how you come off as. And it is also believed that that's the sign you act like when you're barely waking up. Rising sign, that's how you awake in the morning. That's how you arise. So, for example, if you're a Pisces rising, you might be in a daydream-like state, or you might be still in your dreams, and you might be very quiet. Whereas if you're a Leo rising, you might wake up very ready to go, very fiery, very rah, rah, rah. It's time to get it, And that's basically how the rising sign is seen. And the rising sign is also known as the ascendant. So those terms are used a lot interchangeably when it comes to understanding the natal chart. So I'm a Pisces ascendant, I'm a Pisces rising. It's essentially the same thing. And also when you're reading for your zodiac sign, they say you need to read for your rising sign, because that is the zodiac sign you are destined to be. So for example, if you're a Capricorn rising, you read for Capricorn. If you are a Gemini rising, you read for Gemini. If you're a Cancer rising, for Cancer. You can also read for the other signs, but the one that's going to be the most accurate is your rising sign. And for your love readings, you will read your Venus and your Mars placement. If you are a heterosexual cis woman, you will read for your Venus placement. If you are a heterosexual cis male, you will read your Mars placement, and so on and so forth. Or for example, if you want to see the type of woman a certain heterosexual cis male likes, you will look at his Venus placement. If they have their Venus in Leo, they like very fashionable and will probably be more drawn to Leo women. Or if you have your Mars in Leo for the women, you might be attracted to Leo masculines, or very leadership-like people that are just naturally drawn into the leadership role. So yeah, so that's what I got for you on your rising sign and on your Venus and your Mars sign. Now your moon sign, the moon spends about 2 to 3 days in each sign. Depending on where the moon is, people are more than likely as a collective to embody that sign. And if it's in that place in your natal chart naturally, you're going to feel it more. For example, when the moon's in Scorpio, the collective wants to isolate and delve deep into psychological, transformative, occult topics. And if you are a Scorpio moon and the moon is in your sign natally, depending on which house it is in the natal chart, it's going to act differently. For example, if it's in your first house, you might be feeling something about your appearance and you might want to transform that. Whereas if it's in your second house, you're going to be thinking about your possessions. Or it is in your third house, you're going to be thinking about transforming, networking, or maybe taking something apart. Because keep in mind that the Scorpio represents death, regenerative transformation, taxes, and all that good stuff. The occult, psychology. So and each house represents a different thing as well. So depending on where Scorpio and what that house represents is for you in your natal chart, it's going to interact different for all of you. So for example, if you are a 8th house moon and you have Scorpio in your 8th house and there's where it is, you are going to feel it very strongly and maybe be able to tap into psychic abilities a little bit more. Same thing with Pisces. This happens with a lot of water placements, especially water moons. So yeah, and you can get access to these websites. You can go to astrodenist.com, AstroSeek, and Cafe Astrology, and you can follow this girl called Electra Soul 444 on TikTok. And that's how I was going to say one app to avoid, because they were seen on TikTok, the creator saying that they purposely put negative things so that the collective braces themselves for that. But that's not okay, because that's kind of like you're manifesting that on the collective, but that's a topic for another day. So yeah, so those are websites you can get your natal chart at, and the way you can get an accurate natal chart is you need to know the time you were born at. So let's say, for example, you were born at 1:51 a.m. at 7/17/2022, which is today. Your rising sign is going to be like a Taurus rising with the Cancer sun and a Pisces moon. So this is going to be a very intuitive person. So yeah, so with the birth time, you're able to get the rising sign, because the rising sign, there's a lot of debate about it, but I personally feel that it is important because that's what gives you the most accurate layout of your individual natal chart, where your placements are exactly, because it also goes by your geographic location. A person that's born in Cuba versus here is going to have a different rising sign and a whole different natal chart compared to somebody born here in Laredo, Texas, or wherever you're at. So yeah, so the number 12 is very significant here. Always remember 12 signs, 12 houses, and that's how it's going to go. And so, for example, it always starts in spring. The astrological new year for topical astrology, we always start with the sign of Aries, and then we move on to Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. And so each sign has its own house. So you guessed it, the first house is ruled by Aries. The second house is ruled by Taurus. The third house is ruled by Gemini. Fourth, Cancer. Fifth, Leo. Sixth, Virgo. Seventh, Libra. Eighth, Scorpio. Ninth, Sagittarius. 10th, Capricorn. 11th, Aquarius. And 12th, Pisces. And so if you have and not only is each sign represents each house, each sign is also ruled by a planet. So Pisces is ruled by Jupiter, Neptune. Aries is ruled by Mars. Taurus by Venus and the moon, because they have a ruler and a co-ruler. Gemini by Mercury. Cancer, they are ruled by the moon. Leo, they're ruled by the sun. Virgo, they're also ruled by Mercury. Libra by Venus as well. Scorpio, they're ruled by Pluto and Mars, because prior to Pluto's discovery and Neptune's discovery, which is why Pisces is Neptune or Jupiter. Same thing with Scorpio, it's either Pluto or Mars, because they would have to share rulers. Sagittarius, it's Jupiter. Capricorn, Saturn. Aquarius before the discovery of Uranus. Also Saturn, but Saturn and Uranus rule Aquarius. So depending on, I'm going to get into the planets in the houses as well. So depending on where these planets are in your chart, and depending by your personal rising sign, it's going to look different. Like, for example, this person, their first house is in Aquarius. Okay, so they're ruled by either Saturn or Uranus, and depending on in what sign the time they were born, Saturn and Uranus were in, is going to be different. So let's say they have their Saturn in Sagittarius. That means they're going to have their Saturn in the 11th house. So that means their Saturn is not in the first house, or let's say they have their Uranus in Aquarius, then that means their Uranus is in the first house. Whereas their Saturn, which is the planet of karma, is going to be in their 11th house. Now, the 11th house, like I said, is naturally ruled by Aquarius and represents the house of friendships and networking. If it's by Sagittarius, this person's going to have a big group of friends and a big group of friendships. Whereas because it's ruled by Jupiter and Jupiter expands. Whereas if somebody were to mess with this person, they might lose. Their friend group might be smaller, for example, is how I'm seeing it by the house. I could be wrong. I'm still learning. I learn every day on how to do this, okay? Every day I always learn something new, something about an asteroid, because there's also asteroids in your chart, and each asteroid represents something different, but that's way more advanced. First, we're going to get down to the basics, okay? Which is just the sun, moon, the rising, the difference between topical, vedic astrology, the 12 signs in topical astrology. I don't count Ophiuchus or Ophiuchus or the one with the Ophiuchus. I should know how to pronounce this, but I can't right now. Okay, and now I'm going to get into what the 12 houses means. So like I said, the first house is about your appearance, how you look, how people perceive you. It's the house of the rising sign, your ascendant, okay? The second house is the house of your possessions, your material stuff, how you get things. So for somebody who has them with Aries, they manifest things quickly. The third house is the houses of networking, which is ruled by a Taurus or Gemini. Geminis are communicators. They naturally are social butterflies. So the third house is how you communicate. Your fourth house is the house of the mother, your household, how you were raised, how you want to run your house. The fifth house is the house of creativity and children. Usually your firstborn, you can tell their zodiac sign by their fifth house. Mine is in Virgo, so yeah, my firstborn's a Virgo. So, and how you like to create. So the fifth house, depending on what sign you have, how they like to create, that's how you're going to create. And the sixth house is the house of health and career. So it's how you like to work, how you like to keep yourself healthy, and also what kind of health issues you might experience, because for every good there's bad, okay? And the seventh house is the house of marriage and relationships, what kind of sign you're more inclined to marry, how you're going to have your marriage, if you're going to have divorce or not, depending on what planets are in there, depending if there's some retrogrades or not. Then there is your eighth house, which is the house of death, regenerations, taxes, and property, and religious beliefs in the occult. Then there is your ninth house, which is the house of how you study and spiritual and how you get education, knowledge, and philosophy. And then the 10th house is the house of social status and how you climb up the career, if there's any scandals or fall from graces there, how people perceive you. So it's the house of social status, okay? And then, like I said earlier, the 11th house, it is the house of friendships and networking, how you get friends, how your friend group is, how your views are, if you're very giving, or if you're very how you are as a friend, if you're very humanitarian, if you're very disciplined, if you're very nurturing, or if you come off cold. So it just all depends on how it is. And then the 12th house is the final house, is the house of spirituality and religious beliefs, and it's how people have spiritual practices. Somebody who has a 12th house in Pisces is going to be very spiritual and very inclined and very religious, depending on what it is, like whatever religious beliefs this person is going to be inclined to, they're going to be all into it, okay? And that's how, that's what each house represents. I oversimplified it. And in each year, depending on where you're at and how old you are, each house also has every age. Like, for example, when you're 30, you're in your 7th house, perfection. And depending on what sign is in that 7th house and what planet is the ruler of that house is how you're going to expect it. So, yeah, so there's 12 signs, 12 houses. We got your Aquarius, like I said. You got your Pisces. It just depends on what time you were born, what your rising sign is, where your moon sign is, and what house it's at, where your sun sign is, where it's at. Like, for example, somebody who has their sun in the 10th house, whatever they do in career is always going to be illuminated. It's always going to bring this. It's always going to be in the spotlight. Okay? And that's just me oversimplifying it. And now that I explained a lot, it's a lot of information to take in about the 12 signs, how the astrological new year starts in topical astrology, the difference between topical and vedic astrology, what the sun sign is, what the moon sign is, what the rising sign is, the websites you could go to gain your knowledge, and the book. The book that I had mentioned is the only astrology book you'll ever need. That was back in 2006, 2007, and it came with a CD-ROM that did the natal chart for me. But there's free websites you can do this. There's Astrodenist, AstroSeek, Cafe Astrology, And you can also Google this. Like there's more out there, but you have to know the time you were born and the location. Ask your moms, check your birth certificates. You can find it there. We also talked about the 12 houses and what they mean. And we also talk about what each planet, what each sign and which planet is their ruler. Like I said, Taurus and Libra are ruled by Venus, and they all have co-rulers because prior to those outer planets being discovered, Scorpio was ruled by Mars. And originally, they believe that, according to Hellenistic astrology, they believe that Mars is a water planet because there's evidence of water being found on Mars. So that's why Mars rules. They feel that it's more powerful and stronger in Scorpio versus in Aries because of that. Okay. So I hope all of this was helpful. I hope these how-tos and these tips are able to help somebody. And if you have any messages and would like to reach out or email me on how to better understand certain things in your astrological chart, go ahead and Gmail me at readingsfromneptunetarot@gmail.com or the Neptunian Kitty Kitty at gmail.com. All of that is all together lowercase. So yes, I hope all of this information, I know it's a lot, I hope all this information is very helpful and you're able to understand. The next video I'm going to do is going to get into more depth on the houses and how the planets interact in the houses. And then we can get into detail about transits and synastry. But the next video I'm going to be working on is how to manifest with the Lionsgate portal. And it's how I'm going to do it. So yeah, everybody else does it differently. But yes, I hope all of this was informational and helpful, and I hope you all have a blessed week, and I will see you all in time for the Leo messages and for the Lionsgate portal. This has been the Neptunian Kitty Kitty, sending you all an amazing, amazing healing vibes and positive wishes.